coming out just moment by moment, bit by bit, that we've been processing through since yesterday's show. And I have to say, some of it's not a surprise. CNN doubling down on their original assertion that, you know, there's no there to the story, that their story is false. They can't admit they're wrong. They can't come out with the truth. I have to say, the developments around the comments of DeSantis down in Florida, where he made the comment about monkeying it up, a whole lot of people got in their feelings. I initially was like, what did he say? But if you look at what he said, it was not a reference to his opponent at all. And we really have to be careful how we allow the left to redirect and redefine what we believe about our brethren. Remember, yesterday on the show, we established that white Americans and black Americans are brothers, related, integrated, a part of the same family, American, uniquely American. So from that, we're just going to keep on rolling, you know, with that truth. When you know better, you do better. When you find out something that's true that you didn't know before, you adjust, you reset the paradigm. And that's what we have to do, which means, first of all, I know I'm not a monkey. I'm black. I know I'm not a monkey. And I don't think that white Americans, by and large, think that black people are monkeys. All those that believe in evolution aside, because we all know who really created every single one of us, every single atom, every single, thing that we see was created by God. Those of us that know that are aware that there's no way any of us, no matter what our skin tone, could be monkeys or parts of monkeys, because God created the animals for our benefit. We're not a part of them. They are here for our benefit. So there's some interesting developments there. What's on the show today? Who's on the show today? Well, we're going to talk about ICE rounding up 160 illegal aliens in Paris, Texas. We're also going to delve into speaking with Diego Echeverri, Director of Coalition's Concerned Veterans for America, about a new documentary on the woes of the Veterans Administration. This is super important to me, and it should be to all Americans, whether you're a veteran or not. I happen to be a fourth-generation military veteran, decorated military veteran myself, and my father has, Purple Heart. It's good stuff all the way around. My husband's a veteran, so this is super important to us, but it's even more important to people who are actually relying on the VA for their health insurance, for their health coverage, for their medical care. So we're going to talk about that with him. And then in hour 2, we have very popular guest Mason Weaver back on the program. He's going to join the show and talk to us about this so-called controversy, this fake burning fire. You know, it's like one of those candles that you buy when you're not allowed to have an open fire. You buy the candle, it flickers. It's a little battery-operated light. That's what's going on here. This is a made-up controversy about DeSantis saying, monkey it up. So we're going to talk to Mason Weaver about that in hour 2. Right now, I want to get into this bust. And please don't mistake me. This is great news. I'm happy that there was a bust. 160 undocumented workers, otherwise known as illegal aliens, were detained in Paris, Texas, working at a company called Load Trail. Now, this is super, super important because the details is where all of the craziness resides in the story. Let's first listen to this ABC News report about the actual raid that occurred down in Paris, Texas. It's number 4. Oh, maybe we don't have audio on that. I will go to I'll go to the story. So the story itself is about this company called Load Trail. Load Trail is a company in Paris, Texas, and they've had problems before with their employees being illegal workers. Now, the problem is enforcement on both ends of the spectrum here. You've got obviously people who are working in the country illegally, but if you didn't have employers who wanted to give them jobs, then that wouldn't work. So it's federal authorities went in and they had the big buses that they pulled up and they controlled all of the entry points and the exits, and they executed a raid. So here's that audio.
I would really, really like to their cars.
Federal agents came from New Orleans.
It's a little breezeway here.
From Houston and San Antonio.
And we're getting out at the northeast corner.
Move.
for one of the largest operations of its kind.
I know I just heard helicopters everywhere, a whole lot of people running, and so I turned to run, and the first corner I hit, I got guns drawn down on me.
ICE agents descended on a trailer company called Load Trail outside Paris, detaining 160 workers that ICE agents said are in this country illegally.
I knew that these were clearly illegals. This is not the way we're supposed to be hiring.
This is one individual who might prove helpful to the federal investigation.
I was threatened a few times. Made me feel physically threatened.
She is an insider at the company and agreed to speak to us if we did not reveal her identity.
What was the motive from your managers, do you think?
Greed.
End of the day, simple, we want to make more money.
They greed, yes. They couldn't make enough money.
So you would be thinking to yourself, well, there has to be some kind of incentive against, so something in the law that makes employers think twice about hiring illegal immigrants. And I would say, there are fines and there's prosecution. But those fines and prosecution were lessened during the Reagan administration. And then during successive administrations, they've been tweaked. And so sometimes they're tougher, sometimes they've been weakened. It used to be so expensive that it would literally put companies out of business if they hired illegal immigrants. And that's something what we need, but it's not exactly what we have now. So this person, she would be what you would consider to be, a whistleblower, if you will. She's disguised. She's got a hat on. She's obscuring the shape of herself. And then they have a machine that they're using to adjust her voice so that you can't tell who she is. So she's cooperating, and she wants everyone to know what went on before and what the employers actually said when she became concerned that so many of their employees were here illegally and working. And so here she is in number 5.
Business was good. She said the company had a backlog of orders and it needed workers. But 4 years ago, Load Trail paid almost a $500,000 fine for employing undocumented immigrants.
You took all this to your managers. What did they say to you?
They told me just to keep doing my job, that if they were visited by ICE again, they would simply pay the fine and go on.
The special agent in charge told us this is a criminal investigation, but she stressed that no criminal arrests happened today. Agents did not charge the owners of this company, but they stressed that this investigation is far from over.
It's a big deal. I mean, this is, like I said, this is probably one of the larger single-site worksite operations in the last 10 years.
God bless ICE.
Dozens of employees got to leave the company on foot Tuesday.
Crazy stuff.
Each wore a green wristband signifying they are citizens, as buses were brought in for more than 150 of their co-workers who could now face deportation. Jason Whiteley, Channel 8 News.
So he sounds so sad. Did you notice that? He's like, who could now face deportation? Really? I'm sorry. Why is he sad for them? Why is he not sad for the probably black workers who would be working at Load Trail, but for these illegal immigrants? And why is he not sad for the school district and other places that tax revenue, that receives tax revenue from tax-paying Americans, that has been deprived of that revenue because these people were paid off book, under the table, not paid according to our normal procedures, which means they did not pay income tax and they didn't pay into Social Security. Meanwhile, these illegal immigrants are receiving benefits. They're using the emergency room for their medical care, and we taxpayers are footing the bill for all of that. Why does this man not have any sympathy for that? I mean, these news folks they have no shame, y'all. None. They don't have the shame that a toddler has in their pinky finger while they're eating up all your donuts, because toddlers have no shame. These news people are kind of like that, only they're not cute, they're not soft and juicy, and nobody wants to pick them up and hug them. It's just terrible. So now I want to turn to, we're going to pivot over to another topic, and this is breaking news. I'm just, again, I guess I'm going to be flabbergasted all day, so I might as well, just prepare myself. Mississippi wants the U.S. Supreme Court to define transgender rights. Now, we all know here on this good straight up conservative radio air that individuals suffering from body dysmorphia have a mental condition. They are mentally ill and need counseling and treatment in order to bring their minds into proper recognition of the body that they have. They do not need to lop off parts of their body or readjust their body, mutilate their body in order to have a body that matches their mentally ill. They don't need that. They need medical attention, but not to confirm their mental illness. So that being said, you got the state of Mississippi joining 15 other states in an amicus brief asking the U.S. Supreme Court to review a case involving the hiring and firing of a transgender person. Now, I mean, no offense, but what must it be like to have to work with someone who, first of all, like every day they get up and they are sure they're in the wrong body, so they dress like a different gender. They dress as if they're something else every single day. They go through all of the machinations of trying to make themselves look like they are something that they are not, and then they come into the workplace. How do you think they deal with reality at work? Well, RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes Incorporated versus Equal Opportunity Employment Commission and others originated in Nebraska. The attorneys general in Alabama, Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, Wyoming are the states that have joined Nebraska in asking the court to review the decision. In addition, Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant, along with the governors from Kentucky and Maine, joined the request. So 19 states and more than 300 municipalities across the country enacted prohibitions against firing or not hiring someone because they're transgender. Pump the brakes. This is the problem. The federal government doesn't have the right to tell private businesses and entities that they have to hire someone who's mentally ill, someone who's going to drive away their customers, someone who's going to present a face to the public that is not the face that that company wants to put forward. I mean, you don't want the first person your customers see to be a 6'4" grown man with a beard who's made up with lipstick and eyewear and everything and has their hair curled and has on fake fingernails and a dress and heels, hairy legs and all. You don't want that to be the first person that your employees see. And those are the jobs that the transgenders are going for, the out front public facing jobs that mean that you can't have them do a job for you and kind of keep what their outer appearance to themselves. They have to be out front representing your company. And if you don't want that, well, the federal government's going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. That is absolute nonsense. I'm trying to figure out, where exactly do liberals think the government ends? They claim they want the government to stay out of women's bodies. They claim they want the government to stay out of people's bedrooms. But if it's your workplace, they want the government all up and through it and definitely in control of it. Forget whatever you started or whatever idea you had or whatever 18 to 24-hour days you put in for 2 or 3 years to get your company off the ground. I'm telling you, the government is saying, not so much. You got to do what we say. LGBTQ advocacy groups consider the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as a key component in protections against discrimination. Jim Hood's office did not wish to comment. Attorney General Jim Hood. Apparently, it's the governor's perspective to join the proceeding. WJTV 12 reached out to Governor Bryant's office for comment, and they referred them back to the language in the brief. Let's get on this, prayer warriors. We got to have some serious time, because this could go badly. All right, when we get back, we're going to have our first guest. Stay right there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives we look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. One of the saddest things to me is the enormous amount of money we Americans throw away. Money is a resource that must be used wisely. I can recall my dad teaching me some hard lessons as a young man. He would give me an allowance, and usually my allowance was based on chores and the things that I did around the house. But I remember him on more than one occasion looking me straight in the eye and say, "Okay, son, here's the money. Spend it wisely. When it's gone, and if you don't make wise choices, you're going to be sorry because you'll go without." Money is a resource. It's something that God places in our hands to be used and to be used wisely. Proverbs chapter 21, verses 16 through 17, Solomon has some wise counsel for us. Listen to these words. "A man who wanders from the way of understanding will rest in the assembly of the dead. He who loves pleasure will become a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not become rich." Solomon is telling us, hey, look, back up a little bit. Understand that you need to approach life with wisdom. Understanding will protect you. That is what he says in verse 16. Secondly, he underscores the fact that if we live for the moment, we will rob our future. He says in verse 17, "He who loves pleasure will become a poor man." If you spend it all on having a good time right now, in this moment, later on, you're going to need the resources, but they'll be gone. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Ask God to show you how he wants you to use the money he has entrusted to you. He will give you wisdom. After all, it does belong to him.
You've been listening to Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz, pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Roswell, Georgia, and heard on the weekly program Living a Legacy. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org, livingalegacy.org. Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Head over to afr.net, and you can also find us at urbanfamilytalk.com. We'd love to have you hit the subscribe button, and also find us on Facebook, where the algorithm attempts to beat us down, but we persist. Welcome back to the program. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome a friend of the show, Diego Echeverri, Director of Coalitions for Concerned Veterans for America. Diego, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about this. There's a new documentary out on the woes of the Veterans Administration. That can't be a happy thing to watch.
That's right. So Concerned Veterans for America Foundation for the last year has been working on producing this documentary in partnership with the GI Film Festival. And this documentary is called The Care They Burn. Folks can go to thecaretheyburn.com to learn more, or they can go to cvafoundation.org. And this website travels along with several patients at the VA. They tell their stories of the lack of care that they received, the delays in care that they received at the VA, the struggles that they had with figuring out the bureaucracy, kind of the arbitrary situations that many encounter trying to figure out how to get their health care benefits. And some of them, unfortunately, are tragic and led to death. And so we were left to interview the surviving family members. The state of the healthcare at the VA has gotten so bad that we have folks dying while waiting for care. And so CVA Foundation put this together. We are having screenings all across the country every week to show this movie, to share it with military family members, with veterans, and with concerned citizens, to really bring people this information and share with them how bad the situation is and why we need reform at the VA and why we need bills like the the Mission Act, which passed and was signed by the president, and why we need more reforms at the VA, choice and portability of veterans' health care.
All right, so the name of the documentary is The Care They've Earned, and you can find the there's a trailer for it here at cvafoundation.org, CVA, like Concerned Veterans for America, cvafoundation.org, and you can watch the trailer there, and you can also sign up for their email newsletter where you can have different information emailed to you to help understand the plight. So you spoke of a bill that the president just signed, and I know you came on when that bill was signed and talked about it, but for listeners who might be just tuning into the show, we're speaking to Diego Echeverri, Director of Coalitions for Concerned Veterans for America, and I'd love it if you would just talk a little bit about what that bill that the president signed into law will actually do for the Veterans Administration and for the veterans that they care for.
Well, so what happened after the Phoenix VA scandal is that it exposed the problems with veterans' access to health care. Many veterans, around 40 or so veterans, died while they were waiting for care at the VA. So in response to that tragedy, there was a bill called the Veterans Choice Program that was passed through Congress and signed by President Obama, and that created a program of choice where veterans, unfortunately, though, because the VA has had so many issues, this program was layered on top of the VA system that already was quite ineffective and inefficient in terms of giving veterans their real eligibility for access, because they were already manipulating the scheduling program. So this program, called the Veterans Choice Program, was created so veterans, if they lived outside of 30 miles or 40 miles of the VA, or had an appointment that was given to them 30 days out or more, that they could have access to private health care in their community. As I mentioned, unfortunately, this was layered on top of a system where they were already manipulating wait times, and the system really depended on a bureaucracy to operate. So many veterans were not able to get real access to that program, the Veterans Choice Program, so it needed to be reformed. And the Mission Act reformed the Veterans Choice Program by making it also permanent, because originally that program only had a certain amount of funding, and it kept running out of money. So President Trump signed that bill this past summer, and we're very excited and optimistic about what it means for veterans' choice, veterans' health care moving forward.
I agree. I'm hoping that the legislation has the impact that it is intended to have, but I would really like to see veterans' health care, at least the bulk of it, privatized in such a way that the kinds of things that we saw with the scandal of the veterans, dying waiting for an appointment, that would be impossible to occur, because veterans wouldn't be so centrally tied to one organization that seems to be bogged down with poor employees. Diego, thank you so much for joining the show today. Diego Echeverri, Director of Coalitions Concerned Veterans for America. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.
All right, good to talk to you. So we have opportunity within the sphere of government where the government can actually do things that are great, but most activities should be in the private sector, and the government should be really strictly in the business of making war, protecting the homeland, providing for the national defense, and other things that are in the enumerated powers of the Constitution. Once the government gets so big as it has, where it's dabbling in other things, the government always seeks to grow. It always seeks to continue programs. Notice they never end. Things that were started, we just need to fix this. We need to have this temporary program. That's what our federal income tax is. It was supposed to be a tax on the richest people in the country that lasted for a set number of years and then was phased out. But once the government got used to getting that money, they were like, well, not really fair to just tax the rich. Everyone should, pay. And since then, we've been arguing about who should pay what, instead of arguing why any of us are required to pay for our bloated federal government. All of those jobs, people just sitting around in offices pushing pencils around, and now instead of pencils, they're pushing laptops around, some of them just spending the whole day watching pornography, and all on our dime. And we don't think twice about it. We just don't have an option because they take the money out before you pay for your bread, milk, and eggs, before you give your money in church, before you pay your bills, make sure your lights are on, make sure your mortgage is paid, the government gets their money. Isn't that convenient? So you never get a chance to ask, what are they doing with this again? Why do you need this much again? Why are my property taxes that much again for a school district that only serves about 35 to 40% of the kids in the district, in a neighborhood, in a district that every household doesn't even have kids, but every household contributes to the school district? There's a lot going on with the way we view government that's wrong. And while all of us are pondering that, we've got the socialist contingent that's really rearing its head up after indoctrinating our kids in public school for the past 30 years. Now they're ready to start trying out some of the policies from Venezuela. Why would you want to try out people eating zoo animals and pets and, losing 30 pounds on average every single citizen except their fat leader? Why would we even want to entertain that? Yet Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are walking among us. Yeah. So I talked about this story a little bit yesterday. I want to give all of the details so we can fully understand, because I'm so tired of seeing the statistic floated around. And that is that there are 235 school shootings at different schools during the 2015-2016 school year. Now, this is not from a conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, the Daily Signal. This is not from Breitbart or some other online news organization like the Right Scoop, where it's from the conservative perspective. This is a report from NPR, hardly a right-leaning organization. In fact, they're run by the leftists. We all fund them through our tax dollars, but it's a lefty thing. NPR was only able to independently confirm 11 of the shootings. 161 of the shootings that were listed in the report were errors, and 4 were miscategorized incidents. Problems ranging from unclear definitions and user error to technical malfunctions plagued the survey process. Here's the problem. Every person in the media is trumpeting this 235 shooting number, and they use it interchangeably, kind of like the 11 million illegal immigrants. When you say to someone, I was listening to C-SPAN yesterday, and there was a representative on, and he was sounding so middle of the road. It's almost as if C-SPAN told him, you can't be on here talking, you got to sound like you represent all of Americans instead of just the left. So he's on there talking about, undocumented immigrants this and Republican bills that, and yes, we do need some enforcement and blah, 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 blah. And a caller called in and said, look, the fact is, there's 30 million illegal immigrants in this country, and there'll be even more until we seal the border. And he immediately stepped in and corrected him and said there are 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. Now, we've gone over how Ann Coulter and Adios America kind of did that calculation. It's a number that we've been using since the 90s. There's no way there's only 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. It's like there's no way there were 235 school shootings in one school year. So the Department of Education vastly overstated the number of school shootings that occurred in 2015 and 2016. And this is an investigative report by NPR. So they were actually concerned by that number and went out and did an investigative report. And then, I'm so overjoyed that they decided to tell the truth about it. That they didn't hide the information. They stuck it in a report. So the Civil Rights Data Collection, CRDC, 2018 Spring Report on School Climate and Safety for the 2015-2016 school year, published by the Department of Education, another bloated, out-of-touch, government agency, stated that 235 schools, about 0.2% of U.S. schools, reported at least one incident involving a school-related shooting. Out of every school mentioned in the report, and of the 176 schools that responded, only 11 confirmed that incidents meeting the government criteria for a school shooting actually occurred. 4 of the schools who replied miscategorized the incidents that they reported. The Department of Education stated in response to the NPR report that it relies on schools to self-report accurately. The Department of Education plans to publish updated data in the fall of 2018 and told NPR they will not republish the current report for the 2015-2016 school year. So the good news here is that investigative journalism still has an impact. And I want people out there who are thinking about this. Maybe you have a college student who's considering journalism. Maybe you have a kid who is already on their school paper in high school, or they're doing yearbook and they're really interested in it. This is a story that shows that good investigative journalism that comes from a place of truly seeking the correct information and knowledge can really have a lasting impact on public perception and public policy going forward. We don't have a problem of that magnitude in this country with school shootings. Every school shooting is one too many. Every child that loses their life for any reason at all, to include at the hands of someone who's wielding a gun, is a child whose life should not have been lost, and it's something that we should be concerned about. But in order for our concern to have legs that can actually stand up and support us doing something positive that leaves a lasting impact, we have to deal in facts. And what we've heard from the Department of Education has now been proven by NPR to be unfactual. So the ACLU of Southern California also did some looking into this information. You know, the Department of Education, when they put that number out, a number of organizations, on the right and the left, were like, whoa, that's a lot. Is that really the case? Let's look into that, because we need to figure out what's going on. So you've got the ACLU of Southern California confirmed fewer than 12 shooting incidents, and the Everytown for Gun Safety database found 29 shootings for K through 12 schools from mid-August 2015 to June of 2016. Now, the Everytown for Gun Safety folks, they're gun control lunatics, wine box aficionados, with their fancy handbags and their overpriced, minivans. And they're always rolling into inner cities, lecturing black people about how it is that they should give up their guns when they live in these really crime-infested areas, and people there should have proper training and gun ownership to protect themselves from the criminal elements in their midst. Then the wine box drinking chicks put their wine boxes back in their trunks. They put their fancy handbags on the seat next to them and strap it in and drive out to their suburban, schools, pick up their kids and head off to, jump around or gymnastics or soccer. They've gone in, they've lectured, they'd had their moment in the sun. The news organizations have come in and given them airtime and made them, pseudo-famous. They've done nothing to help the people in the inner city who are suffering from the gun violence. And the women with the wine boxes don't know anything about what it's really like to live under that kind of threat of constant violence that happens on these streets in these inner cities. So I'm actually really surprised to see that they have a database. It's incorrect. It shows 29 shootings instead of the 11 that were actually verified by NPR, but at least they have a database. I mean, I guess they took time out from sipping to actually put a little bit of fingertips to keyboard to get a little something done. As far as how a vast discrepancy between the report and reality could occur, some school officials said in some cases it was a matter of user error with their digital reporting system. So Jeff Davis is a superintendent at Ventura Unified School District in Southern California. He told NPR that he thinks someone just pushed the wrong button. The school district misrepresented to the CRDC that 26 shooting incidents occurred in that 1 year in their district. It doesn't come close to what the outgoing superintendent said was reality. He said, I've been in the school district, the Ventura Unified School District in Southern California. This man, Joe Richards, said he worked there for 30 years and he doesn't remember even one school shooting. They reported 26. See what I'm saying? So yes, we need to encourage our kids to get out there. If they're interested in journalism, get out and do it. But do it from the neutral perspective. We need people to do these kinds of investigations to show that some of these folks who are typing in the keyboard, they can neither read nor add. Their numbers have to be verified. Not 235 shootings, 11. Nationwide, country of 325 million plus 30 million illegals. It's a problem, but it's not that big of a problem. All right, when we get back, we'll have your calls. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037, right after this.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
When my co-author Nathan Whitaker was 9, he went skiing with his parents in Colorado. All along the slopes, signs were posted with the warning, "Beware of snowcats." After 3 days of skiing, Nathan said, "Daddy, have you seen one yet?" Seen what, Nathan? A snowcat. Smiling, his dad explained that the signs were referring to snowplow-like machines, not a wild cat. Nathan was relieved. But despite believing that at any given moment a snow leopard could leap out from anywhere on the slopes, Nathan never stopped skiing. Instead, he pointed his skis straighter to be ready to outrun the danger. No matter what you face in life, just keep on skiing.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Just how many genders are there? Scientific evidence has shown that our DNA is encoded male or female. There are no other designations at the genetic level. Tell that to legislators in Massachusetts. Their attempt to follow the trend in Europe of permitting a third gender designation of X on driver's licenses was thwarted by a quick-thinking Republican, State Representative Jim Lyons. Lyons knew that each amendment to a bill in the Massachusetts state legislature must be given 10 minutes for debate and 3 minutes of voting time. Instead of considering the X designation only, he added all 73 of Facebook's gender options for consideration as well. Debating all of the gender options would cause their reasoning for allowing just the one addition to fall apart. As time was of the essence, as Lyons completed amendments for 35 of the 73 gender options, his Democratic counterparts withdrew the bill. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Securing America.
The United States could start playing war games again on the Korean Peninsula. The Trump administration had said it would suspend joint military exercises with South Korea as part of discussions with North Korea. Tuesday, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told reporters large-scale exercises could return.
We have no plans at this time to suspend any more exercises.
Secretary Mattis said the decision to suspend exercises was made in good faith as a result of the Singapore summit.
We also knew very clearly this was going to be a long and challenging effort to negotiate this away. As you know, that war began in 1950 and has never ended.
The news comes after President Trump canceled Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's planned trip to North Korea this week, citing a lack of progress on denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program.
CNN is being torn apart from within based on their being caught on a major lie and refusing to admit the mistake. Sloppy Carl Bernstein, a man who lives in the past and thinks like a degenerate fool, making up story after story, is being laughed at all over the country. Fake news. The president just tweeting that moments ago. Back with the panel. This has to do with CNN and Lanny Davis being a source for a story that he says is no longer true about Michael Cohen.
Right, and CNN now continues to stand by its story, even saying that they had other sourcing for this claim that Trump had knowledge of the Trump Tower meeting before it happened. It's hard, though, to see where that other sourcing would come from, other than Lanny Davis, who admitted being the source and now walks it back. The larger picture here, though, Brett, is Trump is, I think, continually saved by three things. One is a news media like CNN, which sometimes discredits itself with some of its false reporting and also its bias. Another thing is the lack of a credible Democratic alternative, right? Because we look at the Democrats, it's impeachment, it's abolish ICE, it's Medicare for all. And then the third thing, which of course is always neglected in the midst of all these scandals, is the American economy. And the news there continues to be good with consumer confidence and GDP numbers just today.
Wow. So GDP just revised up again to 4.5%. I believe that's what I saw, 4.4, 4.5%. So still being revised upward. The economy is roaring, and we're not seeing the president get a lot of credit for that. So it's the last segment of the first hour. We love to take calls during this time. If you'd like to get in the call queue, it's 866-963-2037. Let's speak with George on the school shootings. Thanks for calling in the show.
Yeah, how are you, Tracy?
Stacey, and I'm doing great.
Okay. I had to laugh to keep from, really getting too serious about that situation with the speaking about monkeying around. I think what it boils down to is some people are not comfortable in their identity. They're very insecure. And that should tell a lot of the Democratic voters, don't vote for this guy. He's amongst other things, he's insecure. He doesn't know who he is. He's not stable. He might fly off the handle about a lot of different things. So the only thing you can do for somebody like that is pray for him and let them grow at their own pace. But he's not ready to be governor of Florida. He's not ready to be over a bunch of people, because also he doesn't understand there's a lot of people my age and older who got enough sense to realize the things she's talking about, free this and free that, is stupid, because it's like there is no free lunch. You have to know that going in. You can't do this to people. I mean, it's just fiscally totally irresponsible thing that he's saying. And people have to wake up. And I'm saying it to any of the Democrats who are going to vote for him, even Republicans are going to vote for him. You know, think about what this man is really saying long term. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I have to agree with you. The things he's suggesting have been shown not only not to work, but to be budget busters. Like we're talking about, they're unsupportable by taxpayers, things that just cannot work. And he's not just promoting them; he has to, because his backers are George Soros and the George Soros foundations and some really hardcore lefty groups that want to see socialism in America. He's also an acolyte of Bernie Sanders. So he's really been indoctrinated into thinking that it doesn't matter if it works. What matters is I have to be elected and I have to push these ideas because the people who are pushing me are paying me to push them. And so the monkey in it up comment is really, it's like the sideshow. It's not even when you're thinking about your meal. If you go to Red Lobster or someplace and they bring you that tiny little salad in the beginning, the monkeying it up comment is not even that tiny salad at the beginning. It's definitely not the biscuits at the beginning, because those are awesome. It's like something you order that the server forgets to bring to the table, and you don't realize you didn't get it until you get home. That's the monkeying it up comment. It's just not even worth discussing.
Exactly. And you got to surround yourself with people that are more intelligent than you and are going in the direction that you want to go, and you glean from them. And him, I mean, if he really sat down and thought about it, studied history, really looked at his position, looked at the things he's saying, he would come up with probably a different approach.
Well, we would hope, but sometimes the indoctrination is just so strong, and people are unable to overcome it. The answer, though, is, to think about what works and then to vote accordingly. Thank you so much for calling the show, George. I appreciate your call. Okay. So if you'd like to get in before the end of the show, there's still a little bit of time left. The call lines are open at 866-963-2037. So what George is mentioning, and we will get into this a little more in depth with Mason Weaver when he comes on the last segment of next hour, is the policies that have been promoted by this gentleman, this guy. He's pushing universal health care, and I mean all the same old that Bernie Sanders has promoted as well. Notice how Bernie Sanders, like if you listen to any of the interviews, we should have like a Bernie Sanders segment where we play all of the audio of him kind of he gets to kind of, you can hear him start cranking up when you ask him difficult questions like, how does universal health care work in a system where we have so many different insurers? If you nationalize it all, then how do you pay for it all? How do you get people to buy into it? What do you do for people who decide they're going to just stay out of it and they're not going to participate? Or is that what you want? There's a lot of people who've asked questions of Bernie Sanders like this, and they have been routinely, he just filibusters. He just lets you know, well, I'm not really going to answer that. He doesn't say I'm not going to answer that, or he'll say that these are the questions that naysayers always ask. And you're like, well, naysayers are asking these questions because this is important. How do we fund what you're promising? He can never answer. So I'm fine with him not being able to answer. But I think it's interesting that most Americans, I'm not sure if people actually tie it together, that he's constantly pushing in ideas that he can't actually explain how they work. He just always points to other countries where he says it works. But then if you go online and research some of the other countries he's talking about, you'll hear these other people, people from those countries, talking about how it doesn't work. Oh, I don't use national health insurance. So that's people in Canada say that all the time. They have a private market that they can pay for. So they just pay into the private market. Their taxes go to the big, the big market, the national health insurance, but they pay out of their pocket for real health care if they can afford to. People who can't afford to just bumble through with what the government's providing. And they don't have the same kind of access that we have. I talk about it all the time. And it's my favorite example because it is so important to be able to get testing to figure out what's wrong with you, like a CT or an MRI scan. These are scans that give the doctor a picture of the inside of your body, your organs and everything, and how those organs are interacting. And it uses contrast dye. They inject the contrast dye into your veins, you drink some of it, and then you go into the machine. And when you go in, the machine takes, thousands of images of your body, knits those images together inside of a computer program, and then the doctor can literally use their mouse to spin your torso or, your chest, whatever they've CT'd. They can spin it around and look at it. And I know this because when I've had a CT done and the doctor says, well, it's kind of inconclusive, and I get that face, that face, like I've drank that stuff and I'm feeling not so great. You better find something up in there. They've showed it to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, is that? And they point out your organs, the front of your organs, the back of your organs. Look at that space in between those two organs. That's normal. In Canada, in one province, they don't have as many CT machines as we have in one hospital here in St. Louis. And as much as I like suburban St. Louis, we are not a world-class city when it comes to size and population and all of that, like some of the other, size-wise, Atlanta, Washington, D.C. metro area, New York City. I like living here better than I'd like living in any of those places. I wouldn't want to live in any of those places. But when we talk about population size, we just don't have as much. But we have so many machines. One tower at one hospital has more machines than a whole province in Canada. So what does that mean for access? 9-month wait. What's a 9-month wait if you have some kind of infection or some kind of communicating, abscess in your abdomen or your digestive tract? It means you're dead. That's what it means. All right, let's go back to the phones. We have Marilyn in Ohio. Thank you so much for calling the show, Marilyn.
Hi.
Hi.
I am amused by your...
Oh, you're dropping in and out.
Or whatever.
I couldn't hear that. You dropped out for a little bit. Could you start again? Because I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, okay. I'll pump it up. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was just saying I love the analogy about the wine boxes and the stiletto shoes and all of that. But my question is, how does George Soros get by with so much power and so much money that he can buy these people? I just don't get it, how somebody can do something like that. It's ruining our country.
So, there are some...
That's all.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thanks for calling and thanks for your comment. I'm glad you enjoyed that because I definitely... I get a little irked by them because they have a chapter here in St. Louis, and I've actually been at one of their rallies. Not a lot of them, but I've seen them getting out of their vehicles, and there's nothing wrong with being suburban. I live in the suburbs. I have purses. I don't drink wine out of a box, but I get it. But I use those things to describe them because they're the kind of people who are so out of touch with their target audience, inner city blacks who are living in crime-infested areas, that they're not even in the same universe. Yet they deign to rain down their prognostications on inner city blacks about guns from on high, from their safe suburban neighborhoods where response times from the police are less than 60 seconds. You know, I live in a neighborhood like that. So, you know, it's one thing for me to talk about it. It's another thing for someone else who lives in a suburban area to talk about it. That we're in one area. It's another thing for people who live in that environment to talk about it. So, you know, it's that's what I try to get across. As far as George Soros, there's so much that he's done that I can't even describe to you. But I will say, guess who can? Ann Coulter. So she's written about him in a number of her books. She rips into him in this book, The Resistance is Futile. If you're interested in understanding how George Soros got all of that money to be able to do the things that he does and why he's been banned from certain Eastern Germany, Eastern Europe, there are some countries, I think it's Poland and Hungary, who've banned George Soros from even operating in their country because George Soros tanked certain world markets in Great Britain to make a lot of money on the backs of the British people. It was like one of the great robberies of the century as far as him coming in and manipulating the market so he can make money. He does that all over the world. And now he's in America because he wants to destroy this country. And so when he tries to present himself as this kid who survived the Holocaust, that's not it. That's not who this man is. He's as dangerous as you ever think a person could be. And maybe we'll do a segment on George Soros, and I'll share some of what Ann Coulter, the research that she put into her book about him. I'll have to make myself a note to do that. It's crazy because you would think someone would have arrested him and brought him up on high crimes and misdemeanors for trying to destroy the economies of entire countries. But instead, now he's in America. You know, he's just here like a parasite, riding on us, drinking our blood. That's what he's like. We just have a minute left. Let's take one more quick call. Reed from Texas. Hey, thanks for calling the show. You got about a minute.
Thanks, Stacey. Love the show. Just wanted to make a comment. You talk about this exaggerated number of school shootings, but it kind of goes along hand in hand with the indoctrination that our children have been getting for years from these educators, these so-called educators that are teaching our kids reading, writing, arithmetic, and so forth. These people they have their own agenda, and it fits their agenda perfectly to exaggerate the number of school shootings to try to control what goes on in this country. I'm going to hang up now so that I can hear your comments.
Sure.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for calling the show and for the compliment. I agree with you. You hit the nail on the head. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I think one of the primary things that parents should do, and I know school year just started, but it's never too late, is evaluate whether or not what their kids are getting in their public school, because there are still very high quality public schools out there that don't indoctrinate. But for the most part, if you're in a major metropolitan area, the K through 12 education system in your area is probably engaging in some of this. It's national. Should your children be there? Are they getting the education that you want them to have as American citizens? Evaluate that, think it through, and then make your decision and act on it. They're your kids. You'll be held accountable for them. And we have to make these choices. All right. That's hour one. We'll be back with hour two. Right after these messages, we'll have Mason Weaver. So come on back.
Urban Family Talk.
Being there is half the battle. 1milliondads.com exists to help Christian fathers to be present and intentional in the lives of their children. Our hope is to wake up the fearsome wonder that is the mighty man of God and restore him to his role as leader, teacher, and counselor. Visit 1milliondads.com. 1milliondads.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowered. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
The court hearing is set for today in the case of the man who police say tried to set off a bomb in a New York City tunnel last year.
Akayed Ullah, a Bangladeshi man from Brooklyn, is accused of detonating a pipe bomb filled with metal screws in the tunnel that connects transit lines under Times Square. He is facing up to life in prison on a 6-count indictment that includes providing material support to ISIS, use of a weapon of mass destruction, and committing a terror attack against a mass transport system. Earlier this month, prosecutors warned that Allah had said more is coming and, quote, "You started this war, we will finish it." That was following his arrest. The threat came 11 days after Allah's attempt that left him and 3 others hurt. In New York City, Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
He used to be a cop in Texas. Now he's behind bars. Evan Brown reports.
Roy Oliver was a police officer in the Dallas suburb of Balk Springs, and he was just convicted of murder for his shooting into a car and killing a black teenage boy. Jordan Edwards was with his friends and was unarmed. Oliver said he feared the vehicle was going to hit his partner, but his partner told the jury he never feared for his safety. Now Oliver is in prison
for a term of 15 years.
But the family of Jordan Edwards claims that's too short of a sentence for murder. They say their son won't be alive, but that Roy Oliver will have a full life after prison. In Miami, Evan Brown, Fox News.
It was too good to pass up for the mainstream media when news broke that President Trump knew about the infamous Trump Tower meeting before it happened. Steve Jordahl reports the only problem was it was wrong.
CNN went on the air the evening of July 26 with their breaking news sounder.
A claim that goes to the truth of what the president knew and when he knew about.
From there, it was on.
Bombshell. President Trump.
CNN cited an anonymous source behind the claim that former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen was going to drop the dime on his former client and testify that the president knew in advance of the Trump Tower meeting between his sons, Don Jr. and Jared Kushner, and a Russian attorney who promised dirt on Hillary Clinton. Finally, the smoking gun. But Curtis Houck of Media Research Center says the network took that gun and shot itself in the foot because Cohen lawyer Lanny Davis admitted to being the source. And further,
things slowly started to unravel when Lanny Davis went on his media tour last week. And in that, he revealed that actually he didn't have any evidence of that.
Did CNN issue one of its now regular retractions? No. It's sticking by its story and saying that Davis could not be reached for comment. The only problem there, he was reached, and quite publicly, on CNN.
So we have CNN passing off to us that Davis did not comment on the story when actually he did, and that not only that, he was their source. That's lying, misleading to their viewers.
Houck says that's becoming business as usual for CNN. I'm Steve Jordahl.
A California bill to transform college and university health care centers into abortion vendors is on its way to the governor for signature. And as Chris Woodward reports, people in other states ought to be paying attention.
Senate Bill 320 requires these student health care centers to begin distributing life-ending drugs, including RU-486, which Christy Hamrick of Students for Life of America says has resulted in women's deaths.
Certainly infection, excessive bleeding, all kinds of issues, particularly for women who are later in pregnancy or have an ectopic pregnancy. Now, these conditions require that you have an ultrasound examination. They require medical supervision. They require things like blood transfusion. This is a huge deal to transform health centers into abortion vendors, and California is trying to make this a first-in-the-nation effort. The bill sponsor has been very upfront with the fact that she wants to see this transformation take place not just in California, but across the country. Go to studentsforlife.org, and you can find all there, or nocampusabortions.com.
I'm Chris Woodward.
American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Peete.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here. We're happy to be, doing some live radio right here on your terrestrial radio stations and also streaming to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. So thanks for everyone who's in the chats on all those different areas. Great to be with you today. So we've already covered the illegal aliens who were rounded up and the bust over at that trucking concern. And we have had a lot of info. I think that story about the guns, it's kind of staggering that news media outlets use this story. They've trumpeted this across the land. Most Americans were, chewing on their dinner and heard it and thought, wow, that's kind of crazy. And then that's it. The correction by NPR was probably heard on NPR, which is national. It's huge radio. They're usually in the top 5 for talk, usually the second or third radio station you'll find ratings-wise in every major metropolitan city. And they probably covered this story once or twice and gave it a little bit of time, not on television, but on their radio outlets. And then that's it. It's huge. This is a story that CNN and everyone else should cover because the safety of America's children, whether the kids are in danger or whether they're ultimately safe or somewhere in between, the truth should be the order of the day. So if you actually, you know what I'll do? I'll put the link to this in the live stream, and I'll also post it as a story on Facebook. You can print the story off and show it to friends and neighbors. You can tell people about it. You can share it on your Facebook. Get the word out that NPR did investigative journalism and found out that this report by the Department of Education was false. It's important for us to know the truth. So now let's talk about, Andrew Gilliam. So Andrew Gilliam is the individual who is running for governor. It's kind of a like a bellwether election because if he wins, he would be the first black governor of the state of Florida, and he would be the highest statewide elected official of color in the entire state. And that is what the Democrats are pushing. They're comparing his race there in Florida to the race for governor by Stacey Abrams in Georgia. And the Democrats would love to flip Florida and Georgia from reliably red states to reliably blue states because that would help them clinch the Electoral College, since they don't intend on ever going back to truly representing blue-collar workers and individuals who, live in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, places like that. Those are not voters that they can satisfy any longer with their current agenda. So they want to flip states that have higher numbers of minorities so that they can, that's another path to Electoral College wins. It's an ingenious strategy considering what they're pushing and how it doesn't work, but it's not a done deal. So you would think if that's their strategy, they would run someone for Florida governor who presents ideas that could actually work for Floridians. Ideas that are not just workable, but have shown success somewhere else so that he would be seen as someone who could come in and immediately take the reins of power and lead Floridians to prosperity. Instead, you have Andrew Gilliam revealing his plan to raise taxes to pay for his ridiculous liberal policies. It's number 6.
Since you mentioned money, Mr. Mayor, you also ran on universal health care, lots more money for schools and especially for teachers, raising the minimum wage to $15 for all Floridians. Specifically, Mr. Mayor, if elected governor, how are you going to pay for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, what we have proposed is an increase in the corporate tax rate, which in the state of Florida is lower than our neighboring states of Alabama and Georgia. Right now, we're at 5.25%, and we've suggested going up to just over 7%, which puts us in line with many other states. And part of what it creates $1 billion in funding for our public education system.
All right. So a couple things. Remember, we've talked about here on the show this book called How Money Walks by Travis Brown, and it catalogs in excruciating detail how states that have low or no property tax, states that have low or no income tax, are havens for families, prime-aged families. So families that have kids, two-income households, some single-income households, they flock to states that have low income tax or no income tax, and they flock to states that have no property tax or low property tax. And the reason they do that is because they make a calculation. And this is something that if you haven't thought about it, you haven't thought about it. It's like out of sight, out of mind. And with our taxes, it's really like that. It's not until you get a bill that you feel is outsized or they jack your taxes up really high. Then you're like, whoa. And then you're like, well, that means we're over the next 10 years, we're going to pay X. And then you're looking around your house. You're like, well, this house isn't worth that kind of property tax, or this neighborhood isn't worth that kind of property tax, or it is, but I just don't want to live here anymore. We have extra square footage here. We could move to a smaller house, or we could move out of this state. Well, millions of families a year in America make that calculation. They look at maybe their school tuition costs, and they look around in their budget to see where they can find money to save to cover those costs or to outright pay them in cash on a yearly basis. In high tax states, what families do is we all do this. We rank our expenses from, high to low. And when you see your property tax up in the top 3, the first thing that happens is you're like, oh my goodness, in 2 years, that would pay for all 3 of the kids to go to this school. In 3 years, that would pay for this many years of their college tuition. Uh-oh, our property taxes are too high. Now, you might say, well, all you got to do is just vote somebody in who wants lower property taxes. Well, once the property taxes get that high, any person who runs on lowering them has to run against every government employee in the area, because all the government employees want to keep the taxes high because that's what pays their salary. They also are looking at people who can afford to pay them, who really feel like it's kind of an obligation. It's a badge of honor to sit around at cocktail parties and say, yeah, my property taxes are, I pay $30,000 a year, but it's nothing to me. I've actually been somewhere and heard someone say that. There's a group of guys sitting and they were talking about how high their property taxes were and patting each other on the back. And I was thinking, oh, that's ludicrous. And for the area they live in, they pay more in property tax to live there. It's their prerogative. But if you live in a place that's like that, it's not the easiest thing. You're wasting years of your kid's childhood trying to get people elected who will lower the tax rate when you could just find a place where you could work and earn a living and buy a home and put your kids in school, private or otherwise, where the property taxes are not as high. And so he shows in the book how you literally can watch migration patterns. A state decides they no longer want to have an income tax, or they cut their income tax by a significant amount. Population flows into that state. It's that simple. It's literally a magnet. I don't know if it's subliminal or if people are constantly measuring these things. It hadn't occurred to me until I read the book. I know we didn't want to pay high property tax, and we definitely looked at the number on the property tax line on every house we considered every time we purchase a home, we do that. And we ended up in Missouri in the Midwest years ago for work and have stayed here because the cost of living is great and it's a great place to raise a family. But it's definitely, if the property taxes were to go through the roof, or the income tax specifically, we would be out of here so quick it wouldn't even be funny. And there's also the fact that our legislature just passed earlier this year, when we were going through all the scandals with our governor, they'd also just passed legislation at the end of the session lowering our property tax or our income tax in the state. And it's the first such tax cut that we've had in this state for decades. Really, it's a game changer. And so my hope is that we'll see an influx in population here in the state of Missouri, and that will be good for business prospects and for overall the population growing. It's good for the metropolitan areas here, but it's not a secret. This happens. People follow the low tax areas. They flow into them. It's like low tax almost represents a kind of depression in a landmass, and water flows to the low parts. That's how people move as well. Now, here's something interesting. Turn your eyes northward to New York from Florida, where you have Andrew Gilliam talking about raising taxes to pay for these ridiculous things he thinks everybody needs, the government to provide. Well, you've got Cynthia Nixon. Now, remember her from that movie and also the long-running television series that completely obliterated women's decorum in America. Really terrible impact on our culture that show had. And so here she is, she's running for governor. She's completely unprepared. She absolutely has no business running for governor. Just because she's famous and people know who she is doesn't mean she should be the governor of New York. She doesn't believe that high taxes drive out corporations or rich people. And I've just explained to you how it's not just rich people who leave high tax areas. Middle class people do it. They're the primary people who do it. But rich folks, so if you're rich, you can afford to have a house in more than one place and live in one home as your primary residence and have your income taxes paid there. So wealthy people all the time make the decision to have their primary residence in a place that has low income taxes. And then their other residences, they pay property taxes on them, but that's not where they pay their income tax. So she doesn't believe that, the price of tea in China is what it is, or that the sky is blue, or that, that there's proven tax policy in this country. Here she is talking about that in number 2.
Cynthia Nixon, you talk about, and I'm glad that you're very frank about it, you want to tax millionaires and billionaires, and that's all well and good, and corporate tax, but New York is not its own nation state. The companies and millionaires and billionaires can choose to leave to go to other more tax-friendly states like Florida, like Texas. And if you were successful in imposing a millionaire's tax or a corporate tax, what makes you think those companies and those wealthy people would stay in New York?
So I think that wealthy individuals have the liberty of choosing where they want to live. And if high taxes were the thing that were going to make wealthy people move, we wouldn't have so many wealthy people in New York. We wouldn't have so many wealthy people in California. But when you talk about businesses, about being a business-friendly environment, one of the main things that businesses care about is having an educated workforce. And in order to do that, we really need to invest in education. The other thing that businesses really care about is infrastructure. And we've so divested not only from our New York City subway, but from our roads and our transportation in general. If we want to create jobs for New Yorkers, investing in infrastructure is the most effective way to do it. And it's a way to prepare our state for the future and make it more business friendly.
So there's 2 separate things that are an issue here. First of all, it is a part of what the state is mandated to do to maintain roads and bridges and et cetera. That is not done to create jobs. It is done to make sure that the populace has safe bridges and roads to drive on. The fact that maintenance on those structures can create jobs does not in and of itself give governors the mandate to do infrastructure improvements for job creation. Job creation is the purview of the private sector. When you have politicians who primarily want to run on creating jobs instead of running on getting government out of the way so the private sector can create jobs, you get into this dichotomy where she finds herself arguing against the facts. The fact is, wealthy people in New York are already selling their homes because of the income tax thing that was a part of the tax reform bill that was signed in December of last year. Not just the income tax, but the cap, the SALT deduction cap. So you have your income tax that you pay in your state. You used to be able to deduct all of that. Now you can only deduct up to a certain number depending on your income, and you can't deduct all of your property tax. You can only deduct some up to a cap. People are already adjusting and moving to states where that is not a problem. So she's going into this job theoretically on a knowledge base that is based not on facts. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. She's unprepared. She's not ready for prime time. All right. When we get back, we're going to be talking about China and the national security policy with our trade that we've been operating under. And we'll take your calls if you'd like, 866-963-2037. Stay there.
Meet Dan Steiner, president of Preborn.
Jill came into our center about 8 months ago, and she was in a really difficult spot because her husband her boyfriend was incarcerated. She didn't have a place to live. She's out on the street. She came into our center, and when she saw her baby on the ultrasound, she says, I've got to find a way to do this. She changed from abortion-minded to wanting to choose life for her baby, and that's where we came in. Coming beside that ultrasound with baby clothes, with housing for her. Her baby just delivered last Wednesday. It's a little boy. He's beautiful. That's the power of ultrasound.
80% of women choose life when they see their baby on ultrasound. To find out more about how you can help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
In a recent commentary, I mentioned that many radio listeners object to the fact that Social Security is considered an entitlement. After all, they argue, they paid into Social Security and Medicare. Now they are receiving a partial refund of money they paid into the system. And while that is true for some people, it is not true for many others. Let's look at the numbers. A credible analysis was done a few years ago by the Urban Institute. Their researchers figured out what people turning 65 in various years have already paid into the system. And then they calculated what they can expect to take out after they reach age 65. And of course, the actual numbers will vary based upon family income, marital status, and longevity. In most cases, retiring Americans will receive much more from Social Security and Medicare than they put into the system. Whenever I mention this on radio, callers are shocked to hear that and often don't believe it. Here are some of the numbers from the Urban Institute. A two-earner couple receiving an average wage would have paid $722,000 into Social Security and Medicare. They could be expected to take out $966,000 in benefits. In other words, they would be paid about one-third more in benefits than they paid in taxes. A one-income earner couple earning an average wage will pay about $361,000 into Social Security and Medicare and receive about $840,000 in benefits. That's almost 2.5 times more in benefits than they paid in taxes. The conclusion is clear. In most cases, Americans who retire will receive more from Social Security and Medicare combined than they put into the system. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
1990s to Obama era, America's China policy has been heavily influenced by American international corporations. Now, finally, we start to see the long-term impact of this policy. A model in which a profit-driven business sector dominates public policy has brought great damage to this country. What do you think is wrong with this model, and will it happen again?
Yeah, my view, I've been sounding the alarm on what I call the China threat for many years, going back to the 1980s and with my 2000 book, The China Threat. And I've argued since the beginning that the fundamental approach to China has been mistaken. And that approach has been partly that if the United States trades with China, that this trade and business interaction will have a moderating influence and ultimately result in the evolution of China from a communist state to a democratic state. And that assumption has been the underpinnings of American policy for more than 30 years, going back to the 80s. And it's proven to be fundamentally false. We have not seen a moderating of China. We have not seen an evolution towards a democratic system. In fact, we've seen just the opposite. This is what they say, often say about second marriages, that it's the triumph of hope over experience. You can't build a national security policy based on hope, and that was what they did in hoping that trading with China would bring about a more peaceful and a more democratic, more open China.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So that was Gertz of Washington Free Beacon. And he was talking about the idea that in the beginning, Americans really went into trading with China with this hope that they would see, look at what capitalism has brought. Look at what America's able to do. We trade with them. They have some of our goods. Look at what they're able to do. And we should be a little more open to some capitalism. In other words, not to change them completely from their form of government, but to introduce some elements of our own. Instead, what's happened is the Chinese government has taken to stealing from us, stealing our intellectual property, stealing our citizenship by shipping their pregnant women over here on birthright vacations, and they have their babies and then they bring their kids back to get their educations in our universities. And they've embedded people in our universities, in our technology sector, to steal not just the intellectual property of developments that have been made that are now products, but the seeds of those developments. These tech startups are now being funded by Chinese government front organizations. And what they do is they just, in order for them to give the venture capital funding that's requested, they simply require access to all of the information from day one. Now, most venture capital funding is based upon a presentation of a business plan and ideas. Prototypes are shared. But the actual intellectual property, the nugget of the idea that makes it work, is reserved for the individuals who are actually the creators. The venture capital firms get enough information to secure what it is that they're funding, and they put the money in. They have ownership, and they have all of these assurances, contractual assurances that once the product is deliverable and brought to market, that they will share in the benefits, like the sales. They get percentages of the sales. They have ownership in the company. They have, beneficial arrangements for how the stock is arranged around them and positions on the board of directors so that they have control. But the actual intellectual property remains titled and the property of the original creators unless they're willing to sell that afterwards. Well, what the Chinese do when they come in to get this, they'll provide venture capital funding, which comes directly from the Chinese government, is they'll say, yeah, but we need access to the actual idea. Well, that's not what we normally do. And they're like, yeah, but you need this venture capital funding. We want to know how you came up with it. We want to see your original notes on how it was, where were you when you thought it up? What were you doing? What did you write down? Not just your notes, but who did you talk to? Who else was instrumental in helping you to formulate this idea? Show us everything. And some of these tech startups are doing that because they want the money, because the Chinese are offering way more than what American venture capital funders are offering, because the Chinese don't really want, they're not interested in bringing it to market here in the United States. They want the idea so they can use it at home in their country and sell it in the Asian markets. And so it's one thing if we just found this out today, like if this was breaking news today, that'd be one thing. But we've known this for 20, 30 years, since we started putting a lot of our manufacturing in China. Since we changed our relationship from simple trade of already created goods to us putting factories there. They marvel. And I learned this when I was on school board. And before that, I would attend briefings in our school district, and they would have people who are teachers or they're working on their PhD program, and they would travel to China as a part of the research for their thesis. And while they were in China, they would talk to educators there. And they would ask the Chinese people, show us how you teach math, show us how you teach technology and that type of stuff, engineering, the hard sciences. And the Chinese teachers would say, talk to us about creativity. How do you spur creativity in your children? Talk to us about what you do with the gifted children. How do you identify them? Once you've identified them, what do you do with them? What kind of technology do you use? Are you rigid with them? Are they on a program where they do only allowed to do certain types of study? Are they directed into certain fields because of their intelligence? And every one of these people who's been to these presentations, I remember sitting in on a panel that covered this topic at Missouri School Board Association training session that I had to attend in order to be certified as a board member. And they talked the same thing. The Chinese always ask about the creative side of the American educational system and what are we doing with the kids. Now, what Chinese people don't understand is that creativity is nurtured in the classroom, but it begins in the home with parents who talk to their kids, who take them to museums and educational excursions, who read to them, who, it's not about kids watching television and seeing the end product of creativity. It's about kids being exposed to the outside world, to nature, going to zoos, going to parks, being left alone to play and splash around in the mud and do things like that. And on every one of these interactions, the American teachers were astounded by how little Chinese teachers understand about nurturing creativity. They don't have a capitalistic society, and because they have a command and control concept society, which is communistic, that communist control means that so in order to be creative in one area, you're creative in all areas. If you know a person who's creative, they think creatively. That is the way they think. It's not that they turn on their creativity when they're painting or creating music or engineering something. They are creative in their thought processes all of the time. And so they are often the person who will pipe up with an idea or a response to a question that pretty much no one else in the room would have. That it's a type of thinking that creative people engage in. And it's the way they think all the time. This is something that the Chinese are trying to understand so that they can replicate that in their children. They want to nurture that in their children because they're tired of seeing products like the iPhone and other things that were created here in America. They want to see their children creating those things. And they do have creative people, and they do have, but not to the same degree that we do. And so it's just interesting that we know all of that, yet we still put our manufacturing plants in their country because it's cheaper, really bowing down to that dollar. And it is important for us to have well-made goods that are affordably priced for Americans to buy, but not to the degree that we currently have it. No one needs 1,999 shirts. No one needs 40 pairs of, $20 tennis shoes. We do that so that we can have an overabundance of items to sell. But in exchange for that, we're giving away our intellectual property. And that should be something that every president would have been concerned with and worked to put a stop to, but we haven't seen that until President Trump. And it's one of the reasons why you see the hatred of him at the degree that it's at, because he's literally, it's not an upsetting of the apple cart. He's taking the entire train, the freight train of double-stacked goods that is headed to China, and he's standing in front of it with a stop sign and a couple of tanks, and he's like, we're not doing this anymore. And everyone who's benefiting from this, the wholesale, it's like a fire sale of American creativity. Everyone who's benefiting from that is like, I'm not ready to stop making this money. And he's like, this isn't about money, it's about protecting what makes America great. And so, this is where we are. It's important. It's something that I want to see the president follow through on, also the wall. And I hope that he will. I hope that he's not prevented from doing that. So there was something else. Someone made a comment on the YouTube live stream. So I'm getting to it right here. Talking about Stacey Abrams. I mentioned Stacey Abrams a couple of minutes ago, talking about her, it's this groundbreaking race. A black woman would be the mayor of Georgia. Stacey Abrams wants the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to go to individual homes, confiscating all the guns and gun paraphernalia. She's a gun-grabbing nut. In Georgia. I mean, Georgia is a huge gun-owning state. Doesn't make her prospects that good. It doesn't look that good for her. So another comment, Lloyd Braun is in the comments over here, and he says, I wonder how much creativity has been affected with many schools doing away with recess and more kids staying inside playing video games, not having adventures with their friends. I think it's hugely impactful. I think a lot of our kids are, they don't know what they're missing. And there is a lot of fun to be had playing video games. I'm not, our family, we're not hermits. We have video gaming systems here. Our kids do that kind of stuff. I played with a Game Boy and a Nintendo 64 when I was a kid, so it's not like I'm against it completely, but there's that time spent outside that kids need. And as a parent, you kind of have to say, it makes you the bad guy, but if you think parenting is about being your kid's friend or being the good guy, God bless you. I'm not sure where you've been parenting so far, but parenting is really about making those decisions that later on when your kids are adults, and maybe even not until they have their own kids, they're like, oh, wow, I appreciate that. Or maybe they never tell you. They just appreciate it silently. Or maybe they never appreciate it. But it's not about the appreciation. It's about doing what's right for the kid. You have to say, look, this is how many hours a day you're allowed to play with that, that Nintendo. This is how many minutes a day you're allowed to do X. And then after that, you need to put it down and do something else. And whether it's reading books or like Lloyd has mentioned, going outside and having adventures. Because I remember doing that in Germany where I grew up. And then I also remember doing it when we would come to the United States. There were a few summers where my sister and I came to the States and stayed with our grandparents. And we would split the summer between my mom's parents and my dad's parents, they lived in different parts of this very small, rural, like two country towns. And so we would split between those two. And she and I would get up in the morning and we put on our shorts and T-shirt and have breakfast. And, at our country grandma's house, breakfast was like all this bacon and sausage and eggs and biscuits. And we would be so stuffed. Then we would go outside and we'd run around her yard because she had a farm. So we'd run around there for a while. And then we'd come back in and get some water. And then we'd go back out and pick blackberries off the blackberry bush and prick our fingers and go back inside, wash our hands and put Band-Aids on. And then we would go running down the lane. And we would just go as far as our legs would carry us or until the bugs got too loud. Because, out in the country, the bugs are really loud. And we would be gone for hours. And we would come back and we'd be all scratched up and sweaty. And she'd say, oh, go wash yourselves off. So we'd go in the bathroom, wash our hands and our arms and our faces. And then come back and she'd make what would be technically lunch. And then we would lay around and, hot. It's ridiculously hot. We'd try to watch TV, but she didn't have cable. And so then we would go back outside for some more hours and run around, do cartwheels in the yard, get bitten by some more bugs and play around with. At one point she had a couple of goats still because by then she was older. And then we would come in for dinner. And we would do that for weeks on end in the summertime. We had all these games we would play where we were superheroes. It was just a crazy amount of time we spent outside because there was nothing to do inside and there wasn't anything to watch on TV. And I think it really, really helped our development. And we weren't the only ones doing it. We just were so far away from the neighbor kids because she had a farm and it had some acres to it. And so we don't get a lot of that for kids nowadays unless we intentionally plan that out for them. Most of they're going on a play date. They just don't go knock on their friend's house door anymore. It's like, oh, you got to have a play date. The parents have to arrange it. It has to be a start time and a finish time. The parents have to plan out a snack. I mean, we're getting away from that. And that to me is just as dangerous as what we're doing with the Chinese and allowing them to take our intellectual property. And so for parents who are, getting the thing done now and you have the smaller kids, it's as simple as just saying, you need some time outside. There's a swing set out there, but there's also some toys out there. And then there's just the outside itself. Go out there and have a good time. And at first they're going to say, oh, if they're not used to doing it, well, what am I supposed to do? Send them out there for a while and they will find stuff to do because they're kids and they need that time. The Chinese would give anything to have the opportunity that we have to control our kids' environments and to expose them to anything we want, but they don't because they have a communist country. So we got to remember that and be grateful for what we have and use it. Use it or lose it. You know what I'm saying? All right. When we get back, we're going to be speaking with Mason Weaver, author and political pundit, about this whole monkey it up controversy. Stay there.
does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's Uncommon Moment.
When my co-author Nathan Whitaker was 9, he went skiing with his parents in Colorado. All along the slopes, signs were posted with the warning, "Beware of snowcats." After 3 days of skiing, Nathan said, "Daddy, have you seen one yet?" "Seen what, Nathan?" "A snowcat." Smiling, his dad explained that the signs were referring to snowplow-like machines, not a wild cat. Nathan was relieved. But despite believing that at any given moment a snow leopard could leap out from anywhere on the slopes, Nathan never stopped skiing. Instead, he pointed his skis straighter to be ready to outrun the danger. No matter what you face in life, just keep on skiing.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. Hurricane Harvey was the second worst disaster ever seen on American soil. 8 Days of Hope responded to that need in Houston, Texas, back in March, where 4,700 volunteers came from all over the world in all 50 states to love and serve people in need. When we left, we realized that there was still much more to do. So many people still were hurting, hundreds of thousands of families looking for somebody, anybody to help them. Here's your chance. 8 Days of Hope 16 will be back in Southeast Houston October 13th through October 20th. It's free. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who are semi-skilled, and people with no skills or less skilled and want to give back. For more information, you go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. We're expecting about 2,500 volunteers from all over America to go back to Houston to love and serve those in need. Hope to see you in Houston. 8daysofhope.com for more information. 8daysofhope.com.
Military Matters.
Their numbers are rapidly dwindling. Of the 16 million Americans who served in the armed forces during World War II, only about 500,000 are still alive. One of them is William Gilbert, a Navy man who served on the USS Indiana in the Pacific. Gilbert is 94 years old, living with his son in Louisville, Kentucky. One day he mentioned to staffers at the local VA medical center that he's been waiting more than 70 years for the military medals owed to him. Last week, the wait ended. In a ceremony at the medical center, Gilbert received his medals.
Thank you, most of all, Mr. Gilbert, for your faithful service to this nation.
4 in all, including the Silver Star and the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal.
Now, I didn't know it was going to take all of this to go through all of this for me to get it. But so helping, it happened. I lived long enough to have this.
An overdue but great honor for a member of the greatest generation.
I'm lucky, awful lucky.
With Military Matters, Anna Eliopoulos, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the show. At Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us at urbanfamilytalk.com and afr.net. You can find the podcast there. You can share. We really appreciate ya. Okay, so let's now speak to our guest. And so he was on last week, back by popular demand. I got so many comments from people who are like, you know what? Thank you for having Mason Weaver on, and please have him back again. And this next subject that we're going to cover, and we've touched on a little bit, but not to the degree that I believe Mason's going to help us get through this. You know, it's sometimes that you want someone who's a straight talker and a truth teller to kind of break a topic down for you. And that's what we're going to get from Mason. So Mason Weaver, author, political pundit. Mason, thanks for coming on today.
My pleasure, always. My pleasure.
All right, so let's talk about this. People have gotten all up in their feelings because this guy. so he was the guy.
Love when you put things up in their feelings.
They're up in their feelings, and I'm only saying that because I just happen to be on Twitter, Mason. You know this because I'm a mom, and so I'm not immediately plugged in. I don't listen to the new music. You know, I'm just not there, and I'm not supposed to be there. I'm a mom of teenagers. They're supposed to be there. So I saw the video of it was Will Smith, and he was doing the Up in Your Feelings challenge, or the Feelings challenge, and he's in Bangladesh on some bridge, and he's doing this choreographed dance. And so I had to find out why he was doing that. So I, scrolled down on Twitter, watched a few of the videos, and I realized, it's a song by some guy that people have made a choreographed dance to that now Will Smith has owned Twitter by doing. So I felt so up to the minute by knowing that. But I've since lost my place, and I'm back into not knowing enough. But I do know enough to say,
mom I know, but
hey,
you're still a mom.
I'm still a mom, and so it's as cool as I may want to be, I can't keep up with it all. So I do my best. But I have to say, I really thought to myself, as soon as I heard the comment, I was like, well, I probably wouldn't have said that. And I heard it from mainstream media, so I thought he said, you don't want to monkey it up by voting for Andrew Gilliam. And I thought, wow, that's unfortunate, because that's not going to, play well in the media. Well, then I did some research and found out that he didn't say you don't want to monkey it up by voting for Gilliam. He said you don't want to monkey it up by putting someone in place who's a socialist, who has all of these ideas. So it has nothing to do with Gilliam and his ethnic background. It had everything to do with his policies.
Even if it was, even if he said Gilliam is a monkey, it doesn't matter. The Democrats do not wish to campaign on their issues. They do not want to campaign on how to pay for this $1 trillion free giveaway stuff. They do not want to campaign on how they're going to reverse Trump's success. They do not want to campaign on how they're going to destroy ISIS and open our borders up. They rather chase ghosts. So, to your audience, I have heard from very knowledgeable sources. I have inside information. I want you all to take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, in and out and relax. I have on authority, not one Republican in Florida has heard that and said, oh, man, that man said monkey. I'm going to vote for a Democrat now. Not one vote is going to change. What they're going to do is get us to argue with these make-believe fake emotions. Monkey. Barack said the same thing. Matter of fact,
he said the same thing. Thank you. I was going to bring it up, but you got it. Go. Just tell the people what Barack Obama said.
During the campaign, in the same instance, the same content. He said, somebody asked him about making sure the election is going to be fair and they're not going to steal the election, the same Democratic fear. He said, monkeying around the campaign. We're going to stop them from monkeying around the campaign. He used the same phrase. I guess he was just talking from his black side, not his white half. But it didn't make any difference. What?
I'm sorry, but it's true.
Chasing ghosts. It doesn't matter.
It didn't matter.
No Republican. There's nobody on the fence.
I want to point, because you said it's not going to change votes, and I don't really think it is, and I'm actually surprised, because I thought it would be like a bigger deal. But don't you feel, Mason, that as time goes on and every little thing that's said has to be this big emotional look at these racists, that they actually got less traction out of this than they would have a few years ago, because this is all they talk about. And everyone's kind of like, this is a nothing burger. The dude does not appear to be a legitimate racist. He didn't say the guy, he said the policies.
They only have an name calling, folks. What if we're just ignored? We have to ignore stupid stuff. I mean, if I say it to you, Stacey Washington, admit to your audience that you're a 5'2", 280-pound man. You know you really are. You're faking it. How long would you argue with me on that? How long would you debate that? You would say Mason is crazy and move on to the next subject. But we sit and let Democrats say the most insane things.
We do.
They accuse them of doing what they're doing, and we spend all our time debating, trying to convince them that we're not mean, we're not hateful, we're not tolerant. I don't care what a Democrat call me. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I want my taxes lowered, I want my border closed, I want my income I want my kids to make enough money to move out of my house.
I'm telling you, I'm the same way. I mean, I love our children, and there's a part of me, a very tiny part, that wants them to live with us forever because I'm their mom. But the reality is, the older they get, the more they need to be out of this house. And for me to prepare them and for me to have the opportunity, or not really me, for them to have the opportunity to be in an economy where all they have to do is have their skills and their job history, or their ability to show up and, do a job, just have that right. And then there's all this opportunity out there. I consider it a blessing from God. I'm excited. I'm hoping that the economy lasts, so that when they're done with their schooling, they can hit the road running and just say, look, Mom, I got offers from here, here, and here. I get to choose. And then I'll be there like, well, this is awesome. What do you think you're going to do? What do you plan to do? As opposed to the Barack Obama economy, where kids were boomeranging back home. They graduate from high school and then go to college, get a degree in African American studies or women's studies or, you know, illegal immigrant studies, and then come back home. And, basket weaving, come back home, live in the basement, the fully finished walkout basement, but still they're in the basement, and they're down there just living, just like for years and years and years. They're 30, they're 34. Yeah.
Expect to live on you.
Yeah.
My youngest asked me, will I miss her when she moves out? I said, yes. When will I be able to miss you? I can't wait to miss you. I can't wait to come to your house and tear your house up. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I want you to cook for me.
Your car.
Yeah, I want you to cook for me. I want you to. Our daughter used to say she was going to take me to the store. When she was 3. Her big deal was one day she'd be old enough to drive me to the store. And I was like, but will I be able to drive? Or will I need you to take me to the store? Like, I was trying to figure out why she needed me. Like why she needed to take me. But her big deal was she wanted to be an adult who could drive her own car and take me somewhere. And so I still want them to have that attitude. And it's not just you and I. Like, we're not some anomaly. All parents want to see their kids launch, right? You want them to do that. And so it's just funny that so everything I see from the liberals is meant to turn off the critical thinking centers, turn off the ability for people to decipher the truth from a lie, and turn all of these big grown people back into children so they have to stay home.
Don't forget, though, liberals it's a philosophy of slavery. It's the philosophy of feudalism and serfdom. They believe they are superior to you, but kind and nice. So being superior to you, they're obligated to take care of your dumb self. They have to feed you and clothe you, and it's the liberals' burden, like the white man's burden of the past. It's the liberals' burden, the same philosophy. They really resent you thinking you're as smart as they are.
I've met up with it.
They have to put a burden on it. It's a very stressful, very abusive belief system, and that's why those folks in Florida and across the country cannot debate you on what they really believe. They want to tax you to take care of you. You're a slave. You pick their cotton and they give you a place to stay. That's their philosophy.
Well, and so, Mason, I've met up with that before because I've had white liberals on Twitter and I've had black liberals on Facebook. I've had on numerous occasions over the years that I've been doing this where it's been social media, I've had people say, even to my face, well, what you're saying is that you don't want anyone to control what you can do. And that doesn't work. I've had people tell me that. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm not talking about breaking the law. I'm just talking about not giving so much of my taxes. The government has to take those taxes so they can give it to people who need it. If we give it to you, you'll keep it for yourself. I had a lady tell me that. I was like, but I have kids.
They're corporations. They think corporations have to be taxed. They won't take it. I think corporations don't provide anything but tax advantages. Mm-hmm. They hate success.
And they hate you controlling yourself.
Success.
And they hate you controlling your kids. I remember being on committees in the school district, and someone would invariably say, well, we have to embed this in the curriculum because there are parents who won't like this. And I would say, well, wait a minute. How can we work within that? Because if parents have concerns about this, we don't want to go against the parents. And I would have people tell me, look, this isn't about accommodating the parents. It's about teaching their kids things that we know they need to know.
They believe it.
And
you're
wasting our time with that. What we need to do is make sure we can get this embedded in the curriculum so parents who try to opt out of it can't escape it because it's in the curriculum. I'm like, wow.
They really believe it.
Yeah.
And that will satisfy our frustration. We get frustrated because we think the truth will change their minds. And honestly, they know the truth. They really know that Trump is succeeding. They know that lowering taxes brings more income. They know that. They know what success is. They deny the truth, knowing it is true, and they accept the lie, knowing it is a lie. They want the lie, folks.
So we'll put this thing to bed and move on to the next subject. I have a couple things I want to talk to you about beyond this subject, but there's just one other thing. And I'm seeing some conservatives, just these are regular people. There's nothing wrong with them. They want DeSantis, the candidate, to make a full apology for what he said because it's insensitive, so that they can put it behind him. In other words, to kind of close the door on it. I actually gave that some thought. I was like, well, could that work? But don't Democrats? No, it won't work. Yeah, because won't the Democrats take that as weakness? Yeah, so they won't take it, will they, Mason? They won't accept his apology.
It's not going to work.
Yeah,
they want the issue. They don't want the apology. They know the guy is not, like I told you before. They know the truth. They know he's not a racist. They know the truth. They deny the truth and they accept the lie because the issue of racism keeps you from talking about the high taxes, the abusive regulations they want to put on you, and the reverse of Trump's success. They want failure. They can only succeed if America fails. I'm not apologizing. Why would they apologize? He didn't fault anybody. Who did he insult?
He didn't. He was talking about the policies, which don't have feelings because the policies are not alive. That's what he was talking about.
You mean the monkey comment? What policies?
Yeah, well, no, he was saying don't monkey it up by voting for these policies. That was the policies don't have feelings.
Has anybody ever seen a shaved monkey? What color is that monkey?
Oh,
white.
Well, yeah. For a second, I'm like, what? No.
The monkey is white. It just got black hair. Gee, where's the?
So there's a lot to this, but there's nothing to it. It's just one of those things. It sounds like there's a lot to it, but there's nothing.
Who's going to say, gee, I was going to vote Republican? These candidates are so far apart. They're so far apart in their policies that the fence has to be a very, very painful place to be. If you're on the fence on this election, on this campaign, that fence got to be very painful for you because it's very, very thin. There is nothing that anybody should be on the fence about. It's a clear choice. Do you want slavery or do you want freedom? Do you want taxes or do you want your money in your pocket? It's really a clear choice.
So now let's pivot over to, and I covered this a little bit in the first segment, but this is right up our alley, and this is the Second Amendment, and this whole idea that there have been these just 235 school shootings in the 2015 to 2016 school year. That was the number issued by the Department of Education in their report earlier this year, and Democrats have been using that number to press for gun control. Well, NPR, I know, if you're not seated, please hold on to something. NPR did an investigative report on this number to figure out what was going on and found that the true number is 11 for that school year. 2015 to 2016, 11, not 235. Wow. So first of all, of course, NPR covered this on their radio shows and stuff, so it's not a secret, but how do we use this to debunk? I'm not trying to convince any liberals, but I want other people who aren't liberals who are being convinced that there's this huge danger going on to understand that it's not to the degree that has been reported to them because they haven't corrected themselves.
Hey, if there is a big danger in your schools, if your child is in danger of being shot at your school, why are you sending your kid to school?
Uh-oh.
It seems to me that school is a very dangerous place. They're not learning anything, and now they're getting shot too. But we have to look at this in a rational term, folks. Everyone knows that they want gun control, and they use every avenue to gain this sympathy of the people. But it's not working. Nothing is working. It's no one is demanding, no populist uproar is demanding gun control. They're losing because people know that you're safer with a gun in your pocket than the cop down the street. And it's clear at the bell. And all they want to do, once again, Democrats want to control your life. They think they have to control you because they think they're superior to you.
Well, you got to close the show out, Mason.
Your question, how you get this stuff out on the Stacey program. That's how you get it out.
All right. Well, it's out. Thank you, Mason. Talk to you again next week. God bless everybody. Have a great night.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.